Welcome to the Progress Texas Happy Hour.
Welcome to the Progress Texas Happy Hour. I'm Executive Director Kathleen Thompson. We've all slept a little since the election, and nearly the whole team is joining me today for this not so happy Hour podcast recording. Podcast Director Chris Mosier, Digital Director and Associate Sam Gonzalez and Haley Smith, and our advocacy team is present today as well. Hello, Advocacy Manager and Associate Reagan Stone and Tatum Owens. And of course, we've got Communications Intern Jackie Rogers on air as well. Thank you for all being here to support our progressive network of listeners, readers, and viewers who are tuning in for the solidarity they need right now. We're here today to reflect on the wins, losses, and the path forward coming from the 2024 November general election. While many Texans' search results may be overflowing with links to Zillow, Project 2025 explainers, and literally anything else other than election content, Progress Texas wants to give you a gift. We are a messaging organization, and we feel obliged to share 3 short and sweet messages to get you through this happy-ish hour and rough time. Have hope, faith, and persistence. The fight is not over, and we need you now more than ever. But you can take a breather and listen to some reflections from us now. Let's start with the Texas wins. Progressives saw gains in protections for abortion rights in Amarillo, marijuana decriminalization measures in Dallas, Lockhart, and Bastrop. Texas communities elected progressive champions like Jasmine Crockett and Greg Casar to the U.S. House. Julie Johnson is now the first openly gay member of Congress, and Sarah McBride was the first transgender member of Congress to ever be elected. Meanwhile, in Purple Collin County, Mahela Plessa beat Abbott's challenger, and a woman of color still holds this crucial battleground seat. And that's not all. My first question for our team, what candidates, policies, and narratives did you see come from this election that give you hope? Chris, let's start with you.
Well, it wasn't an easy thing to find things to be positive about in this one. This was a pretty complete shellacking, but there were definitely some places that are worth celebrating. I'm really, really happy for Molly Cook, having finally won that seat for a full term. She's gone through so much through winning a primary and winning a special election. And, for the third time, had to do it 3 times to finally become a full-fledged member of the Texas Senate. And I think that's really huge. She's a really, really cool person. And I think is going to be a great benefit to getting our messages across there in the Senate, which is not an easy thing to do at all. I think what I remember during the whole thing going down, one thing that popped out for me is actually a local story. Mackenzie Kelly was the only conservative member of the Austin City Council. She tried to portray herself as a moderate as much as she possibly can, but she has a history of having her picture taken with Proud Boys, and she also was caught on camera talking about disgusting liberals from some event somewhere at some point that was circulating around. She was beaten by her challenger, Krista Lane. So with that change, the Austin City Council is once again 100% progressive, which it should be in Austin, Texas.
You also listen to Protections for Abortion Rights in Amarillo. The travel ban was probably my number one takeaway. The fact that's a glimmer that we can take away and be like, okay, people know that's ridiculous and people have some sense. It's just a matter of getting everybody on board with the entirety of abortion rights, not just pieces of it. We know the mission here, but getting that message out, and we'll talk about strategies later. But another one I really want to give props to, another person I really want to give props to, a candidate that did not win, was Avery Bishop. 28-ish years old. I looked at Google. So under 30, and it's not polite to ask. But under 30 that said, hey, I'm going to do it myself. I'm going to do it. And she put herself out there. She had this image of being, Miss Texas and all that stuff and what they call beauty pageant. And so she had that going for her and against her, but that didn't stop her. She said, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do it my way, and I'm going to do it a modern way with social media outreach, and get ready with me to go vote, and a very unique campaign that probably is going to be part of the book that we read from of how to reach younger voters. one, with younger candidates, and two, with being able to utilize social media in a different way, in a more personable way. That's really exciting as a digital director to see, okay, the win didn't happen, but the strategies are evolving, and that's where we need to start looking.
Reagan?
Thank you, Kathleen. I was looking over the last day or so at our endorsements. Progress Texas, the C4 board, made nearly 50 endorsements of candidates and local propositions. We did have 8 candidates win, and just want to give a shout out to Texas State Senator Sarah Eckhart. Of course, we mentioned Texas State Senator Molly Cook, Representative Cole, Representative Lalani, Representative Anchia, Representative Cassandra Hernandez, and Ann Johnson, Rep. Busey. And then there's 3 propositions I kind of really want to hone in on as really good wins. And also in the hope column, seeing how a campaign, Progress Texas doesn't necessarily just endorse one party or the other. Of course, a lot of us personally lean in one direction, but at the same time, noticing that issues can really bring out votes too. And those are, of course, the Freedom Acts that were in Dallas, Lockhart, and Bastrop. And so seeing the work that Ground Game Texas did in bringing voters out for cannabis decriminalization in those 3 towns, and noting that Bastrop actually nearly 2/3 of voters voted for decriminalization in such a small town, and starting to be more of an urban area, but a rural area nonetheless, is really hopeful to see that if you get folks out there, you hire local leaders, organizers, you get to know the community, you bring folks from that community, and you can win, and you can bring new people into the ranks as well. As far as these folks that voted for decriminalization, there's going to be a margin of folks that hadn't voted for before. And I bet Ground Game's going to keep following them and bringing them out for future elections too.
Tatum?
Thank you, Kathleen. Thank you, Reagan, for sharing all of these victories. I would like to speak on the message or narrative that stuck with me most coming out of the election. I have hope because I'm surrounded by people who believe in creating a more equitable, affordable, free future for each of our neighbors. We have progressive fighters that were elected that prove this, propositions that passed that prove that as well. And like everyone else, Trump's reelection made me feel lots of doubt, dismay about what's in store for my family, my friends, my country, and especially for Black, brown, immigrant, queer communities. But when I finally hopped online after avoiding all the chaos, I saw posts from friends, community organizers, advocates, whose main message was that we keep doing what we've always done. We keep fighting together. Just like a really big emphasis on building community because it's more important than ever. And that includes the people that are already in this fight, but bringing everybody else into it as well. Friends posted affirmations about staying the course for liberation and equality, a commitment to justice, and overall finding joy and hope in working with others that share our vision for change and progress. Yes, the next 4 years promise lots of needless, preventable suffering. And still, there are millions of people who care enough to be there to crowdfund, to fight for your rights and stand by your side through it all. So I still have hope, and I know it's going to be hard. And that's where I am.
What I see this election cycle that gave me hope was regular everyday Texans standing up and saying, I cannot tolerate for one more minute what my elected official is doing. And I'm looking around and I'm not seeing anybody else raise their hands. So I'm going to go put my name on the ballot. And I'm going to go knock doors and talk to my neighbors about the issues that I care about. And I'm going to go ask people for money, even though I've never fundraised before. And I hope that these folks that we endorsed, other progressives who ran, that they stick with it. Ask President Obama, you don't always win the first time, and you keep going. But the gumption and the passion and the maybe rage and the righteous anger that it takes to go and file and pay a filing fee and petition to get your name on the ballot takes a lot of work, and I'm so proud of Texans across this huge state who put their name on the ballot and said, you don't like what this guy is doing? I'm an alternative for you. And we saw the margins increase in some areas, and I think that it can only get better when we all stick together. Jackie, what candidates, policies, and narratives did you see from this election that give you hope?
I don't have much to speak on that, but if I would say there were a lot of close friends of mine or people that I'd known from high school and over the years who surprisingly in the previous years were never vocal about politics before or interested in civic engagement and civic action. And I saw an increase amongst a lot of individuals that I normally would have thought would never be interested in doing something like this. So I definitely think the message that was spread in this election of the dangers of Project 2025 and the dangers of a second Trump presidency, they were very effective. So in that regard, I think that spreading that message was, and the way that it was spread is most likely something that we hadn't seen happen as much in the last election, just based on the very personal effects that I've seen in my community. But I was very proud to see a lot of my friends speaking up about this and encouraging family members to be more informed instead of just voting based off of no information.
Progressives and their allies should be proud of their fight and maintain a strong coalition heading into next year with a new no guardrails Trump presidency, Project 2025 bonfire of our U.S. Constitution, and what may be the worst Texas legislative session in modern history. Phew. However, Texans have already been tested and know best what it's like to survive under hostile conditions. Now is the time to have faith in them and ourselves as we reconcile with half of America and Texas reelecting Donald Trump and Ted Cruz to office. Many of us are wondering how there could be so many Americans enticed by the authoritarian, racist, fascist rhetoric spouted by the holder of our highest office. Team, what are the conditions and narratives that you think push so many citizens to vote for the new right? How does the Democratic Party fit into this? Additionally, I want to emphasize that this isn't a time to cast blame on voter blocks. What groups did you expect to vote this way, and which folks were you surprised about? And how does that connect with those narratives? Sam?
That's the thing that I've been trying to rack my brain about this entire post-election, last couple days. Why, as progressives, we try to help everybody in Texas. And so the question is, why did they vote the way they did? And why is it so opposite of what we are trying to accomplish? And that's hard. It's hard to think about, but I can tell you for a fact, as the only Latino male in this organization, the big talk right now is about Latino men and how they voted and how they went more conservative. And it's not surprising from my perspective. And it's only because I know that the Republican apparatus was targeting them. They said, we're going to talk to Latinos and we're going to appeal to their kind of religious Christian elements and dare I say, and I am going to say, because it's my community, patriarchal elements. And that's appealing at a time where, and I'll get into this more, like post-COVID, where the economy's scary. And it's not bad, but it's definitely volatile from 2 years, from 2020 to now. It went from, absolutely horrible to doing much better under Biden. But the fear and the scare that could all go away at any time, everybody's dealing with that. And so as someone who's promising, albeit as a lie, I'm going to fix the economy, I'm going to make everything better, that's appealing. Safety is appealing. And I just think that it makes sense. Doesn't mean I agree with it. And I think that what should be done next is outreach from our end as to why that was not the case, why these things aren't going to help them, and why it's bad for your community. Despite you wanting safety and security, that you have just upended a lot of things that's going to not keep you safe and not keep you secure. And it's, I know the question is, what pushed them. I think it was just there and to be talked to and communicated to directly. I think the big focus now, and a lot of what people are saying nationally, are how are we not meeting the people where they are? We're an idealistic organization. We have ideals of what we want for Texas, but as the numbers have shown, Texas is a little bit further away than where we want them to be in terms of some of these policies, abortion rights, et cetera, et cetera. But that's where I find hope with my previous answer, that they're not so far in certain areas. And how do we bridge that gap from where they're closer to us and grab their hand and help them?
Well, as the oldest white man in this group, I'll talk about older white men who, of course, have been voting against their own interests for a long, long time. There is no surprise in that group following along with Donald Trump and voting Republican across the board. It is, it's disheartening, not surprising, but disheartening to realize that a great number of these people are dependent on Medicare and Social Security, two things that are almost certain to be on the chopping block over the next few years. And so I feel bad for those men's families who may find themselves in financial straits over the votes that they have cast. Over to reproductive rights, I would have expected there to be a bit more of a rebellion amongst white women. When we have actually seen that, I think close to half of them voted for Donald Trump this time around, which is really also disheartening, but also to refer back to something Sam just said, goes to show how deeply entrenched patriarchal sort of thinking is in rural Texas, and it's also something that's going to take time to change. There's a lot of talk in the press right now about whether or not all the great messages, all the perfectly sensible and common sense messages that we transmit from our side didn't in fact make it to the ears of a lot of these voters. And I think there has to be some reckoning with the party in that situation. And I'm speaking for myself here. We are in the business of crafting messages and crafting ideas and kind of stocking the cabinet, as it were. The party is in charge of choosing amongst those messages and choosing how to deliver them to the electorate so that we can try to attract their votes. I am not sure that they did a great job with that this time. I mean, the results would indicate that they did not. Also speaking completely for myself, there's a lot of talk about, some sort of wholesale change within the Texas Democratic Party. And I would trot out a football analogy, which is that most head football coaches are not going to preside over 12 consecutive losing seasons and keep their job. And that's all I'll say about that.
For my part, speaking about the Texas Democratic Party, I'm a Democrat. I call myself a Democrat. I know our younger folks are more issue voters, and my sons probably wouldn't call themselves Democrats, but they'd be, progressives. But I was sharing with you all earlier in our staff meeting that I know the voice and the name of the Wisconsin Democratic Party chair. And as somebody who lives in Dallas, Texas, why would I possibly know the name Ben Wickler, and why would I know his voice? It's because he does such a good job as a cheerleader for his state and for his policies and for his candidates. And I've just heard him for so long, for so many years. I even know the names of some of his, Supreme Court candidates. And I would love to see more of that here at home. Reagan?
Yeah, I think there's a couple groups I was a little surprised, and I think all of us know we were looking at a lot of polls and knew what issues were important to folks too. Two in particular, and I'll leave it to some of our younger staff members to talk on students, but I think that was a voting block that continues to grow and be voting at larger and larger historic highs. But we're still not always seeing the enthusiasm, or maybe sometimes even the enthusiasm and investment in the issues that matter to them too. But another group that I'll speak on a little more personally is Christians, and I say that knowing that there is a strong religious background in my personal life, and there's a large group of folks that believe that that's their identity here in Texas too. I come from a background as well as personally working in the foster care realm, and I used to actually travel the state and occasionally give sermons at churches. And this is a word that I think I'm hoping can reach some people, or at least start conversations in that world too. You've heard me on past podcasts talk about Christian nationalism. I've spoken that the candidates, a lot of them out there in the MAGA world, are some of the most un-Christ-like characters that we can possibly speak of. The opposites of feeding the poor, the opposites of housing the traveler, the immigrant, opposites of teaching peace, love, acceptance, everything that can be said. And I want to say also this travels the interfaith realm as well. It doesn't matter who you believe in, what you preach. Religion has always been a place for answering questions that are bigger than ourselves. And the fact of that is that there are candidates out there acting like they are bigger than God or Christ or whoever you might be praying to, maybe even more in these like coming days after this election. One thing I'll end on that too, and something, as I was saying, how I used to travel the state and occasionally give sermons, given those pastors a day off, is a word that comes from the Old Testament, and being that the Torah. And it's a word I might butcher. So if there are scholars out there that speak Hebrew better than me, or anything else, it's mishpat, and it's spelled Mishpat, and it means a heck of a lot of things. It means the idea of justice and mercy. And a lot of us, when we think of God or something bigger than ourselves, we think of that justice, like literally fire raining God on us. And that's a lot of what Christian nationalism has taken up. But this word that comes out of the Torah and the Old Testament also has a huge secondary meaning to it. It means mercy. And when it's written in the Torah or the Old Testament in the Bible, it's written and described like this: a bruised reed he will not break, and a smoldering wick he will not snuff out, till he has brought justice through to victory. And so it's literally talking about the strongest form of justice is actually the most merciful. And that might be the first time we've ever said scripture on the happy hour, but maybe I've done a couple of firsts here on the happy hour too. But folks, I just, I'll end just on that. Your strength, your passion is through mercy. And I think that's where we'll have to walk very strongly, but with that of knowing that we are going to carry love and compassion and understanding with us forward. And that can't get in the way and cover up our eyes of what the mission is ahead.
Jackie?
Reagan, I'm so glad you brought up mercy. And this theme, something that I'd learned earlier, years back. It's a Catholic teaching, but it's still a good teaching in this case, having a preferential option for the poor. And so basically what that means is whoever the underdogs of our society are, the minorities, the people who are being mistreated, they're a reflection of what is to come for the rest of us, because if there is no mercy or no justice for them, then anyone could be on the cutting block at any given point in time. I also took a lot of offense to a lot of conversations that were happening around Christianity and, the right way to live your life as a Christian, and how it makes more sense for Republicans to be more Christian when I am a Christian through and through. And a lot of the things that they're saying and talking about with, immigration and LGBTQIA plus rights and the rights of so many other minorities, it's honestly disgusting doesn't really it's not a fitting word for it. It's very disheartening to see this very hateful and ugly message being spread, even to, which to my surprise as well, not really surprise, but to my surprise, minority communities who are pushing out this message as well, insinuating that if you do not fit this certain American model or standard, then there's no room for you here, and assuming that they know so much about Christianity, or they know God or Jesus better than we do, or any other Christian, for that matter, and any other Christian, they know them better than anyone else, to the point where they have the authority to dictate who God does not accept, love, or want, um, under the religion that predominantly dictates this country, which is it's a more extreme version of what it should be. Um, this is a very touchy topic for me, so I'll just be brief with this. But I will say I'm not surprised at all to see nearly 8%. Maybe it was a little more, a little less, but it wasn't a majority of us, of Black women had voted for Donald Trump. And all I can say is there's a quote I remember hearing a while ago: if you're ever in trouble, look for a Black woman, most likely to save you, most likely to help you. Why? Because in every possible scenario and in every case possible, we tend to be the underdogs of society, treated lesser than, et cetera, et cetera. The list goes on. So for that reason, I do feel in my community, a lot of us really want everyone else to have the opportunities that women that look like me lack. Because if we don't have it, it's not a possibility that any of you could have it, which also broke my heart to see around half white women voting for that as well. Again, not surprising, but the sense of solidarity would make a lot more sense considering their position. I don't know what they think that they're going to be saved from, but by voting for him. But it was also heartbreaking hearing from a lot of Hispanic or Latino women, and a lot of Asian women to support that. But Reagan, back to what you were talking about, the last thing I'll say is a very good quote that I think everyone should take from today: my mercy overcomes my wrath every time.
Thanks, Jackie. Go ahead, Haley.
I think for me, I'm a college student. I go to Texas State, and college-educated voters were a decidedly very important demographic this election, very strongly leaning towards Harris and the Democratic Party. And I think it's just because for a lot of uneducated voters, it's easier to believe a lie, a convenient lie, than it is to believe actual policy positions that will help people. And I think convincing people otherwise, like, it really does, it starts with us. It starts with us, it comes from us. And I feel so lucky to be a part of such a great team that is so focused on this output, and so dedicated to having our finger on the pulse and knowing what Texans need to know and getting that information out there. But I think it's also important to realize that these uneducated voters believed this lie because it was purposely pushed to them. Trump supporters, or not Trump supporters, Trump and his campaign, they knew that this lie was easy and convenient, and they knew who to give it to, and they knew how to make them believe it. And that's scary. That's really scary. They were able to take the internet and had virtually no ground game and turn it into things that people actually believe that are so far from reality, you know? And I think moving forward from this election, it's going to be our job and our responsibility to bring them back to reality. And it's going to be hard. It's going to be an uphill battle, and it's going to be really difficult. But I think with the talent that this team has and the talent that Texas has, like you said, Kathleen, we are ready for anything. And we know how to handle hostile weather, and like I said, it's going to be hard, but I think we can do it.
I'll answer as well very briefly about narratives that I think that push so many people to vote. All the Republicans that I talked to, none of them said, I don't want women to control their own bodies and their own futures. I don't want women to lose the vote. I don't want women to be able to get into a car and drive where they want to go. I was told by Republicans, well, he said that he wouldn't ever do a national abortion ban. So that won't happen, Kathleen, don't worry. And we can see in the disconnect across the country in states that voted for abortion rights, but then voted for Trump, that they believe that lie and that convenient lie that Haley's talking about. So I do take some hope from the fact that it really is the most extreme element of the Heritage Foundation and the Nick Fuentes and those people who really proudly say, we don't want women to have rights. The 19th Amendment was a mistake. That's not the Republican Party that I see surrounding me in my communities and in my network. We'll see what happens with the next legislative session, but it is misinformation that is funneled to people with billion-dollar backing that has them believing that convenient lie.
The holiday season approaches, which means it's time to invite you, dear listener, to our holiday parties in Austin and Dallas this December. You know our peerless work doesn't end on November 5th, and funds donated for our holiday parties help us promote our voter navigation website, govotexas.org, which is now translated in Vietnamese, Mandarin Chinese, and Hindi, and to take our fight beyond this election into the next Texas Legislative session in 2025 for our abortion and reproductive rights, climate justice, and election and voting rights reforms. Holiday party sponsorships are available now. See the link in the show notes, and we hope to see you this December in Dallas and in Austin.
Certainly, Trump has tapped into a deep vein of distress and resentment among millions of white, working, and middle-class Americans, and more to be included. We saw warning signs ahead of the election. Take, for example, the top podcast rankings in the U.S. that contrast our lovely team here. I'm just mentioning some of them. Their leaderboard is filled with toxic and hyper-masculine figures that take advantage of the male loneliness epidemic and entice young men with anti-feminist, hate-filled audio sound bites from Tucker Carlson, Joe Rogan, Theo Vaughn. These figures played a major role in the later cycle of the election in these last few months in their conversations, amplifying Trump and denying Harris a chance to speak her truths. This national shift to the right can't be denied. It's clearly linked with an uptick and a following for these guys. Staff, what are your thoughts on how the right's sexism, racism, transphobia, and xenophobia played a part in this election and still kept a majority of Americans under their reign? Sam, let's start with you.
This is the one where, look, I'm 6'4". I don't need a soapbox, but I'm going to stand on the soapbox to be like 7 feet tall. I tell the story for myself, which is how I grew up. I'm a Mexican-American, Chicano from California, and my grandfather was a sheep shearer. He was, as you know, Chicano culture calls it, a macho. He worked with his hands. He sheared sheep with his hands. Before electric razors were even invented, he was using a blade and scissors to cut wool off an animal. He lived outside, slept outside, had my dad. My dad picked apples when he was 5 years old. And his one dream was to work in a place that was air conditioned. That was my dad's dream. And he grew up, had kids, had me. And we grew up with a very patriarchal type of idea. The man leads, the man provides, works hard with their hands, and does all these things. And then I was born, and I didn't have to work in the farms. And I was told to be a good student by my dad. My dad was a little more meek than my grandfather. He had his anger and his macho things, but he worked really hard to fix some of that. And in turn, he made a son that was a little more gentler. And maybe every time he didn't understand why he was so gentle, why he was a big kid, 6'4" giant kid, and he was so gentle. And I had trouble with that too. And because I was angry all the time, because I was taught that you can't be sad. You got to fight. You got to be angry. And this will lead to a point. Don't worry. And then I went to therapy, And then I go, oh, every time I'm angry, I'm sad. And every time I try to will something or have something that's out of my control in my life, I get angry because as a man, I'm supposed to be able to control it. I'm supposed to be able to control my emotions, my feelings, the situations around me, my job, my opportunities, everything. And once I realized that I didn't have to, and that I could be gentle, and I could be myself, and I could be kind and sweet and vulnerable, that's when a lot of good started happening in my life. And, that's when I started getting this job, and I started being able to work in politics, and I found purpose here that doesn't live with anger. It lives with opportunity. And I think that's what the progressive movement lives with. And that's why it functions here. That's why I function here. So then you go to, let's just say it, a white version of that. Clint Eastwood, World War II veterans. They all fought. They were all heroes. They were machos in their own right. They were the Schwarzeneggers and Rambos. That's what they're supposed to be. And then you look at every bit of television, the man's providing for the women on sitcoms and doing all this stuff. And then they get to that third generation, not their fathers, the fathers being, boomers or even Gen X. And now they have no wars to fight. They have no opportunities because of COVID. Their job prospects are gone. The economy's not great by the numbers. They talk about eggs being expensive. They talk about women won't talk to me and I'm the loneliness epidemic. And then you have a group of, men going, well, if you just follow this doctrine and you lean into masculinity, it'll give you everything you ask for. It'll give you the women you want. It'll get you the job position that you want. It'll get you success and money will give you power. And you could do so much with that. And they go, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. Instead of doing what I lucked into, which was to look inside and be like, maybe this anger and this frustration with myself and with masculinity and patriarchy is the thing that's causing me the problems, is the thing that is hurting me the most. And what the right has taken advantage of was the fact that they have the means of video, audio, airwaves to say, hey, not only do we have a doctrine for you, but we have the opportunity for you to to control everything. And that sounds sweet when you're unsure. And that sounds sweet when you're scared. And that sounds sweet when you're poor and you're hungry and you're nervous and you don't have a partner and you don't have friendship because these Joe Rogan guys said, and I can't say it because it's a podcast, but it's lame. Let's say lame to have friends and to love and to do all these things. So they go down a path. I know I'm going long, but they go down this path of hypermasculinity, of sexism, of racism, of transphobia, because they're afraid to look inward. And that explains Latinos for Trump. They go, well, I'm the citizen, and that's by either luck or a border change, as in the border crossed them. That's their advantage. And they go, boy, howdy, I'm going to hold on to this because the world is tumultuous and I don't know what to do. And I don't know how to be what the patriarchy is expected me to be. And I feel worthless. So if you feel worthless and someone says you can have all the power and all the control, God, that's appealing. And I think that plays a huge role where, like Haley was saying, the facts don't matter anymore. You don't need, if someone says, I'm going to fix the economy 100 times, you're going to believe it, even if they don't have a plan, if you're hungry. And then the last point I'll make is economy wise and stuff like that. People can't think and they can't learn when they're hungry. We know that about students, and we are all kids that just grew up. And so if you're afraid, you're backed into a corner, you feel slighted like a lot of white men do for some reason, which I don't understand. It's easy to be like, well, I'm going to fight, and I'm going to fight in this vitriolic way, in the only way I know, and the way that my fathers knew. And it's so frustrating because the answer is peace and acceptance and quiet and love and unity. All the things that these xenophobic, racist, transphobic people want, if they just let go of those things, they could have. And it's just so disheartening. But there's also people like myself, not to toot my own horn, but there's people in this room, in this podcast room, and there's people out there listening that know this too. And the job is to make love appealing. And during times of fear, that's hard. And so I think that's where we're at with it. How do we take this hatred and how do we turn it into love? And that's scary and it's hard. And it's not fair because they get to fight dirty and they get to fight angry and they get to try to control people's bodies and they can try to hurt people. And we have to hug them and we have to embrace them and turn the other cheek, in the Christian or Catholic version of it. It's not necessarily that, but it's definitely hoping that they can do it themselves, because all you can do out there is love yourself and love those around you as best you can. And the second thing you do is show others how to do that. Because I don't think a lot of people love themselves right now. And I think it's because they're scared and they were told a lie that they had to do everything when they really don't. We have community and that's what community's for. And that's what we're for here at Progress, for community. And it's time to get that back. I love you guys.
Haley, go ahead.
I think for me, something that's really stuck out, or something that I think was reaffirmed by this election, is that fascism is not this unique evil that's only in the worst of us. You know what I mean? Like, it's not Dr. Doofenshmirtz with his hands rubbing together like me. It's fascism is seductive. It's convincing. That's how it works. That's why it's so dangerous. And it's been able to take the minds of so many Americans. And I think it's just a reminder that we all have to be on watch at all times. The fight against fascism is never going to be over, but it will be better. We will, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, maybe not, whenever, but it will happen one day where, as a country, we can say that we object to these things wholeheartedly. And we know that these things are wrong. We want to protect and love and let Sam, like you said, care for each other. This is a community. This is something that I kind of feel like a frog in a pot of water. And I've been yelling at all the other frogs, like, hey, we're in a pot of water. Like, what do we do? And nobody else believes me. But we're here. We're here in this pot of water together. We're all frogs. This metaphor is getting really long, but the point is that we are all in this together. And fascism, while it is convincing, while it is so seductive, it doesn't help you. It doesn't help any of us. And loving each other and caring about each other has to come first.
Just to end cap yours, when you said seductive, that's literally what Obi-Wan says. Seduced by the dark side. Darth Vader was seduced by it.
Yeah.
That's the proper phrasing. For those nerds out there who need that connection, that's what it is. It's seduction. It is appealing. And as scary as it to all of us, we saw what Anakin did, thinking he could save everybody, thinking he had to save everybody. You don't have to.
Texas serves as a warning sign for national trends and authoritarian threats. Don't be mistaken, Texas will be at the forefront once again. Our final takeaway for you folks listening is to be persistent in your care for your community members and extending that to your volunteering and mutual aid involvement. Please be persistent in your tenacity to hold extremists and political figures accountable, and be persistent in keeping up the fight under some of the worst leaders and conditions we've seen yet. Project 2025 and the spring Texas Legislature promise some suffering and a sure fight ahead. Going forward, what are the messages you want to see permeate our communities on top issues like abortion, climate justice, public education, and the economy? Haley, let's start with you.
Yeah, thank you. And that's a big question. These issues they're all very different. They all affect different people. But also they all affect everybody. You know what I mean? Like, there's just so much intersection between all of these issue areas. And I think the common thread throughout this entire conversation has just been, we are all in this together. and we can't do it without each other. And Tatum, I really liked what you said about this isn't an us versus them. This is all of us against fascist leadership. And I think all of these issues do need to come together and recognize the overlap between them and the coalition and the strength we can build only when we're together.
Thanks, Haley. Go ahead, Sam.
The messages you want to see permeate communities. Our message here at Progress. As a digital director, I see the numbers and I see what we make. And for those of you who listen and for those of you who pay attention to us, you see what we make. It's great. Everything we make is very good. The problem is that not everybody sees it. Our bubble sees it just a little bit outside of the edges of our bubble, and that's about it. And when it gets to the wrong hands, which one of our videos did on YouTube, and the right wingers get a hold of it, it's not a fun time. Like the hardcore right wingers, I'm saying. But I know we're asking early. This is an early ask, but we need you out there to spread the message. It doesn't matter what we're saying if nobody sees it. And what we say here at Progress, I have 100,000% faith in moving forward. Whatever happens, whatever goes down, I know this organization is going to be on the side of right. And so we just need you out there to spread it. So as a digital director, I try not to put too much of my individual stuff into it. It usually agrees with everybody's kind of coalesced ideas here. And so with that, though, so I can't really ask about the specific messages. I have them. I have my opinions. But my ask is that it gets spread. My ask is that it gets shared. My ask is that you invest in the infrastructure. And that, yes, that means give us a few bucks. Darn it. Not that you didn't. Not that we don't have a big list that we're going to say at the end of sponsors that have given to us. But that's the thing that I've taken away most from this is that our messages were fantastic. The messages that got out, one, it's just a matter of getting more people to see it. And that starts with you all, whether it be spending not a dime and sharing and liking and commenting, or spending that extra dollar that you have. And I know things are going to be tight, but you can make your dollar go a long way with us. And so, and that goes to our excellent message provided by everybody here on this team. So I think that's what I want to see permeate in our communities is our message.
Chris?
It's interesting. Working for this org, I echo everything Sam just said. And to go back to what Haley said, I feel like the spectrum of messages that we provide at Progress Texas have so much to do with each other and kind of form this umbrella of sorts of just the way that we think life should be, the way that we think that things should go. So I don't really, I think having spent as much time as I have with all these different issues, I don't really have a pet issue anymore. I want all this great stuff to happen for all of us. What I do want is to echo back to something we were talking about before, is for us to do some serious soul searching, both within the progressive movement as a whole and specifically within the Democratic Party. How do we get these messages across to voters? We clearly have not managed to do that. Nothing that we talk about is super way out there. This is all pretty common sense stuff that should resonate with any common sense voter. And I know we're up against, billionaire money, and we're up against this lie machine, and we're up against all this, disgusting entertainment that's flying around out there now. There's a lot to cut through. But that's what I want is for all of these messages to have some serious consideration for how to get them across in Texas. And I don't have those answers. It's gonna take all of us to figure that out.
Reagan?
Yeah, I got to say, this team, yesterday we met, and I did not want to jump on a call and chat about the election, but I got to say that I felt better at the end of that call. Let it be known that I did have a couple of tears as well, and was able to let that out a little more. So want to recognize everyone might be in that same boat, and to not put yourself in a corner, and to make sure that you reach out to your community and your people. We got to be in this together. But to get to, that going forward message, and I also kind of want to just say a really big heartfelt, I am sorry for men. They did not show up for their wives, for their daughters, for their families. And that issue of abortion is reproductive, abortion is healthcare, it has been taken by the right, and it's a winning issue for them because it affects people that are typically not engaged in the political system. We're talking about even a lot of folks here would have the means to be able to go and get reproductive health care in another state. But the folks that can't, those are the people that typically don't have powers in their family structures, in their workplaces, and up and down those institutionalized misogynistic spheres. And I guess just going down the list too, in climate justice, these are also issues that affect the people that have the least powers in their community as well. I was looking at a map, 2 data points here. I was looking at a map of how many candidates would win in communities, or rather, I guess the best way to put this is, say we had our 2 presidential candidates and the third candidate was not voting, and you look across the entire state, and many counties in Texas, the not voting, or all of those folks that didn't show up, that was well over 50% in many counties, including in my own rural county in Brewster County out in West Texas. That is a really hard fact, but that's what I'm going to end on here in speaking about public education and the economy in a way too, is that, there's tons of data out there in the world that we're about to go into, which is 4 more years, or rather 4 years of Donald Trump being president. Homelessness, the data shows that in Republican presidencies, homelessness goes up, unemployment typically goes up, disparities between the top employees and lowest employees' salaries grows. And so the data shows that, but I also want to talk to the people that, are literally in those communities that feel forgotten or left behind. And you got to think about the nicest buildings on the other side of the railroad tracks, per se. They're your schools, they're your parks, they're your community centers, and they're built by servant leaders, by people that are elected there to invest money into your community, to not support corporate interests, to not support, the idea of trickle-down economics or tax breaks for the wealthy and for the most fortunate people in our society, or perhaps some of the worst folks as well. And so I'll end by just saying that I'm an elected official in a rural county in Texas, and it's hard out here. And I don't want to put it any cherry on top. We have to make it uncomfortable for the people that are going to be trying to rip away investments for our communities, for the people that didn't go vote. We still need to be a voice for those people that are on the other side of the railroad tracks, per se, however they voted or if they didn't show up. And that's the work that has to be done, no matter what, and what I'll keep doing.
Very good, Reagan. So for everybody listening, as we start to wrap up here, a reminder that your friends like us at Progress Texas and the ACLU and Common Cause Texas and many, many other great organizations in Texas are getting ready for the chaos that's coming in 2025. And while that work will be that much harder, given the results of the election, people are fighting the good fight. We want you to have hope and keep the faith, and remember that at least half of our state, 5 million Texans, give or take, voted just like you did in this election. We want you to remember that. And all of these people want a better future for themselves and also for the other half of our country. And so we're going to be persistent in reaching out to our neighbors to figure out a better way forward. Stay in the fight, especially down here in Texas, because down here and all across the South, we've got some of the largest queer and immigrant and Black and brown and indigenous populations. These communities will see those impacts first and hardest. We'll see national and local impacts from these authoritarian policies and new activists to match. Rewinding to 2016, which some of us remember more clearly than others, I think. The first Trump win, if you'll recall, spurred all kinds of activism. And that's something we've heard from many of our podcast guests over the years when we've asked them about how they got started in their activism journey. The 2016 Trump win is a common feature that got people off the couch and actually, moving forward. I personally think the trauma of the second win, given everything we know about the differences between these two administrations, even before the second one begins, I think is going to motivate even more activation. And so if that's you, this next part, I think we want to try to inspire you to actually do that, to actually become a bit more activated, however you can do that. And so I'd like to go around the horn here real quick as we come up on the end. Share with us real quick your final thoughts on advocacy in the Lone Star State, how it moves forward, and a personal story from each of you, please, briefly, how you got started on your personal journey of advocacy. Sam, why don't you go first?
Well, I've said it before. I'm a son of a union organizer, son of an IRS clerk. This is my activism. And I want to give everyone else the floor, but I will say for the audience members out there, there will be moments, plenty of moments, especially now, where you're going to be too tired to do activism, to advocate for yourself and to do that. So allow me. This is my job. And I have a good message with these good people giving me good messages. And so when you're too beaten down and you're too tired and you're at the moment where you need to take care of yourself and you still want to advocate for your well-being, pass it to me, pass it to Progress Texas. And that's how I will go to bed feeling good at night, knowing that I'm lifting up the voices of others by providing them a message that they can take with them very easily and share with them very easily. So just take heed and know that I will be there for you. Progress Texas will be there for you. And when you're tired and when you can't do it yourself, we can do it for you. So that's my promise, and that's what keeps me going.
And you do such a great job, Sam. We all appreciate you. Tatum, what do you say?
I've actually given a presentation on how I got involved in community organizing before, and I'll say the same thing I said there, which is you've got to be your grandma when you're organizing your community. You got to be your grandma. My grandmother, Guy, I named her. I'm her first grandchild. Linda Mercer Bowles got me into Meals on Wheels. She took us on, my sister and I, on her Meals on Wheels runs when I was young. And there was always a little Dr. Pepper to go with, and go talk with all of the older folks in the neighborhood who were food insecure or couldn't get out of the house. And I think that instilled within me, and thank you, Guy, for that, a commitment to making sure that we take care of each other. She did this through her church. A lot of other churches will do the same. But Meals on Wheels, as a larger organization, helped to remind me that we've got a ton of great nonprofit organizations across the state of Texas that are doing good work to make sure our communities are taken care of. Another moment for me was the Parkland, Florida shooting. That was a moment where I actually started not just doing like mutual aid, but focusing on policy points. And we organized a protest at my school. And it's hard to do when you're not working with a nonprofit. So, but I'll leave advocacy in Texas on is it's much easier to do when you're doing it with a ton of other people, and folks at Progress Texas, Common Cause, ACLU, all the voting rights groups especially, are here to help. And so if you're not involved in an organization already, it's such an easy first step to help get you some of the institutional knowledge you need. And there is a lot to know about politics in Texas and trying to like beat down extremists that are wanting to take away your rights. So join the other people who are already doing the work, and it's one step easier.
Thanks, Tatum. Haley, what do you say?
I come from a very rural area, and Trump getting elected in 2016 definitely changed things. There was a sizable shift that I felt, even though I was like in middle school, but besides the point. But I think in the years following, I didn't find activism. Activism found me. And unfortunately, a lot of it was out of necessity, but it really was about caring about myself and the people I love in the community I care about and wanting them to be safe and healthy and happy. And I think that's how we will move forward. And I think our job here at Progress and throughout Texas and the country is going to be fighting misinformation, fighting disinformation. And I think that's a job that only we can do. You know what I mean? I think that has to come from within, and it has to come from that that care and that love that you have for your community. And it does suck that Trump getting elected in 2016 caused so many bad things, that so many people got into politics as a result of that, as a reaction of that. But I think when opportunity knocks, you have to answer, not just for yourself, but for the people around you. And that's exactly how we will move forward. I don't think we'll move backward. I don't think we'll stay the same, because that's not in our nature here in Texas. We move forward, and I think that's the only way to go.
Well said. Real nice, Haley. Jackie, what do you think?
I went to school in Baltimore, which a lot of the students who'd come from very privileged areas, such as like New Jersey, Connecticut, upstate New York, disgustingly wealthy kids. And they always refer to the area as like the ghetto streets of Baltimore, or like a really trashy city. And it was my first time there. So, I was thinking about like, what are they talking about? Like, what makes it ghetto? What makes it trashy? Like, why are they using these specific words to define the city that's filled with predominantly minorities? I'm not going to make this a minority thing only, but I thought, I want to become a part of something, or become someone that could contribute to whatever issues this community is facing, because you've got this wealthy university smack dab in the middle of a city that's known to be poor for a lot of people. So I became civically involved in my school. I was like our leader, or I was the director of civic engagement, and I organized a lot of outreach programs with nearby schools, and informing students on campus of the environment that they were actually in which I think it genuinely did impact and reach a lot of people, because, they I'm not defending them, but they didn't have any knowledge of that area beforehand. And so when you're coming from an environment where that's all you know is talking down on everything that you've never grown up with, especially when it's people in like a lower socioeconomic status, that's just like their default setting. And I wanted to be the person to tell them, to teach them, to show them that there's a lot more of what's going on behind the scenes than what they see. So that's what got me into advocacy. Also, I was in like youth and government for 4 years in high school, and I love debating and arguing with people, but I've toned that down a lot. So, yeah. And I guess I would say something I am adamant about doing specifically in this state is, for a lot of people, it feels like there's no hope for this election. Especially for me, it felt like there would be a chance that we could flip this state blue. And I don't know how long that'll be in the future, hopefully in my generation, but I do believe that is something that can happen. And I do believe that my generation, it starts when they're young, but we're still very impressionable right now, and like in our 20s and teens and things like that, as stubborn as we like to be at times. So I have a lot of hope and faith for that. I approach people with an open mind, and always ready to have a conversation about anything. So sorry for Blexus. Yes.
Awesome. I love hearing these stories of young, literally kids, when you guys started really getting serious about this. So that's really great. I was quite a bit older. I mean, I was kind of, I was politically, engaged and thinking about politics and voting regularly. But it did take the election of Donald Trump in 2016 to actually get me directly involved. And we had a podcast fairly recently about Democratic clubs. And if that's something that you're, again, if you're concerned, scared, worried about what's going on, with Trump having won a second term, a great easy step is to get hooked up with your local neighborhood Democratic club. I was attending meetings with the West Austin Democrats, and they have meetings every Wednesday. So this was the Wednesday after the 2016 election day. I went to the meeting of the club, and there were a couple of guys speaking. One of them is Rick Kofer, who's been on our podcast before. Another one, David Butts, who is a longtime Democratic consultant here in Austin, dating back to the Ann Richards time. They gave a really nice speech about Trump and about what we were facing that really motivated me. I started providing sound and streaming services to that club, and that branched around to several different clubs. I still do that kind of work on the weekends here and there. Joined a podcast at that time, my first political podcast, which was called Left in Texas. Met Ed Espinosa through that, got hired to do podcast work for Progress Texas, and here I am. I wouldn't be sitting here if I hadn't started getting moving when Trump was elected the first time. And so, again, if you're thinking about, getting off the couch and getting moving, check around and see what the situation is with your neighborhood clubs. KT, let's go with you next.
Longtime listeners have heard me say that I was one of 4 young Democrats in my high school in a very red area of Northeast Tarrant County. And I grew up in a Republican household and a military family. But it was my mother's generation that saw integration of schools and civil rights be passed. She wanted to get her doctorate in veterinary medicine, and she was told to go home and have children instead. And she didn't listen to anybody tell her what to do with her freedom and her future, and I'm not going to either. What I'm going to be doing from now until forever is lock in. We are not that far from the civil rights movement. We are not that far from women being able to have a credit card in their own name. I have checks in my own name, and I intend on keeping them. I'm locked in for the fight ahead. And sometimes it's 1 step forward, 2 steps back, but I'm going to be here for the long haul, and Progress Texas is going to be here for the long haul. And I'm so glad that all of you are on this team with me.
Great. Thanks, Kathleen. Reagan, you're last. Go ahead.
Awesome. Thank you, team. I'm the guy that, spoke a little scripture earlier, and now I'm going to take the podcast to rated MA 18. I'm going to say, everyone, be your badass self. And if you haven't found that person, find yourself, find who you are. And I'll give you just a couple of quick examples of what I like to think. You can look back in history. You can look at leaders like Cesar Chavez or LBJ and Martin Luther King. A lot of these are guys, but there's just as many women out there that have, that have taken huge stances against the status quo and made good things happen. That good fight. One story I love is LBJ standing on the Senate floor when the Civil Rights Act was before them and saying, "Are you going to be on the right side of history?" And towering over them. And you can use yourself, your body, your speech. You can use yourself for that good fight too. Also, other things, and I'm going to compare like drag stars. Like if it's RuPaul being like her badass self, like imagine being out there and starting a movement and saying, "I ain't going to let this die," and going to the point of being an international icon. Use that. And I'll compare RuPaul to literally like military patched wearing bikers. Remember the Westboro Baptist Church standing out at funerals of the U.S. military and standing out there, and those so-called unchristlike folks yelling at these families who have lost someone who sacrificed because of that soldier loved someone differently than the way that they think. And those Patriot Guard riders, as they call themselves, were standing there and singing songs with the families and blocking those what I would just call pretty horrible people away from them. So whoever it is, if it's literally bikers, if it's drag stars, if it's historical icons, if it's present day icons, find who you want to be and take it to the extreme, because that's definitely what these fascists, a lot of these Nazis have done. They've ran to the fence, they've knocked it over, and they're continuing to run. And so we got to figure out who we are and do the same. Find out who you are and be your badass self.
Thanks, Reagan. And thanks, everybody, today. That does bring us to the end of our podcast today. And I want to leave you listeners with the fact that in only one election this cycle, $80 million went into one race. For your information, that amount would grow and sustain our organization for 80 years. Campaigns come and go, but our progressive movement is forever. An authoritarian, extremist ruling party deserves a strong, united opposition. Please stay with us, invest in progressive messaging, and mobilize our communities. Thank you to our sustaining donors, Seth DeCray, Oswald Strobe, and Leslie O'Laughlin. Our opponents are funded by a wide array of deep-pocketed donors. Oil billionaires, religious organizations, corporate backpacks, and more. They all dump millions into the Republican machine in Texas. And as you can see by the state of things, all that investment has paid off handsomely. For us on the progressive side, it's an uphill battle. And the backbone of our funding comes from everyday Texans just like you who agree with our mission and who consider our work worth investing in. We don't operate on subscriptions or behind paywalls because the content we create is important for all Texans to be able to enjoy, learn from, and be inspired by. So if you can, please head right now to progresstexas.org and sign up. Plus, don't forget our holiday parties coming up in Austin and Dallas in December. General admission tickets are available now. See the link in your show notes. You join us each day online. Please come join us in person. Thanks, everybody.
The Progress Texas Happy Hour is a production of Progress Texas, a rapid response media organization promoting progressive messages and actions. Find us online at progresstexas.org and on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. The podcast is produced by me, Chris Mosier, and our featured music is by Walker Lukens. Please be sure and subscribe to the Progress Texas Happy Hour on the podcast platform of your choice. Take a moment to leave us a review if you've enjoyed the show, and be sure and tell your friends about us. Thanks for listening and for all you do to press progress forward here in the Lone Star State. We'll see you again next week.